MTG and me, this is Charles with your 5-minute modern deck tech. Alright, let's go. So for the last couple of weeks I've been playing around with an idea for a modern deck. It's kind of built around a tribal theme, and we'll get into that in a minute, but I'd like to give you an idea of where I sort of came up with the idea. And there are three things that inspired the deck. I have this mono blue Padim Commander deck, and one of my favorite things to do in it is to use an effect like Saheeli's Artistry or Memnarch to make Padim an artifact, giving itself hexproof. The second one is I was flipping through the bargain bin of one of the local game stores and I came across this card, Lord of the Unreal. And Lord of the Unreal reads that illusion creatures you control get +1/+1 and hexproof. And finally, one of the modern decks I've been interested in playing for a while is Modern Merfolk. And we're seeing a lot of new Merfolk come out in Ixalan and Rivals of Ixalan. So I thought, okay, how do I combine all three of these things together? And so I present to you Modern Illusion Tribal. So the core of this deck is probably going to be similar to some of the Merfolk decks you see. First off, we're going to run 4 copies of Phantasmal Image. And the reason this guy is good is because of that combo I was talking about earlier. If you can get Phantasmal Image out on the battlefield while you have a Lord of the Unreal, you essentially make all of your illusions hexproof, including your Illusion Lord, and that's a pretty good play. Secondly, Phantasmal Image is just great against any other sort of creature decks that you're playing against because you're given the ability to copy their best creature. We're also going to play 4 copies of Lord of the Unreal, as I mentioned, as the Tribal Lord. And we're going to run 4 copies of Metallic Mimic. While this isn't an illusion, it makes all your illusions bigger. And, for a converted mana cost of 2 and colorless, it's going to be easy to cast this deck. We're also going to play 4 copies of Krovikan Mist, and this is a great illusion to play because its power and toughness are equal to the number of illusions you have in play. So this guy gets bigger every time you violin an additional creature. Next, we're going to run 4 copies of Gossamer Phantasm. Now this illusion isn't great, but what's key is, as with the majority of these other illusions, it has flying. At 3 drops, we're going to play 4 copies of Illusionary Servant and 4 copies of Illusory Angel. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but giving illusions hexproof gets rid of the most obvious downside of most of these illusions, in that if they're targeted, normally you have to sacrifice them. For instance, we're going to run 3 copies of Opt. This is just to dig into your deck a little bit further and acts as a 1-mana cantrip. And then we're going to run 3 copies of Spell Pierce. This stops some of that early board interaction with you before you're able to sort of double up your Phantasmal Image against the Lord of the Unreal, or before you're able to stabilize the whole board. Now, as I've alluded to earlier, we're going to play 4 copies of Aether Vial, and this allows us to cheat in our illusions on our opponent's end step, or even to use them as a sort of combat trick to buff up, like say a Krovikan Mist, or to violin a Lord of the Unreal in response to somebody targeting one of your illusions. For our land base, we're going to play 17 Islands, pretty straightforward because it's mono blue deck. Then we're going to play 4 Mutavaults, and Mutavaults basically just add a little bit of extra reach. Sometimes even early game reach, because you get the benefits of the Lord of the Unreal, and you can add to Krovikan Mist's power and toughness, for example, by activating a Mutavault. And then in this deck, I currently have 1 copy of Cavern of Souls. I mean, I suppose you could run additional copies of this on the off chance that you're hard casting some of your illusions, but for the most part, you're going to be wanting to Aether Vial those in. Not going to really go into sideboard options too much. This is very meta dependent, but some of the ideas I've sort of fiddled with is Tidebinder Mage as an option to tap down, say, your Tarmogoyf type strategies or other red-green decks. Spellskite to redirect things targeting you, and then the various counter spell packages. And we see a lot of this in some of the Merfolk decks, so like Ceremonious Rejection against Tron, possibly, some Dispels, maybe Into the Royals. One of the more interesting sideboard considerations might be at least a couple copies of Psionic Blast. Because again, even though most of your creatures are pseudo-evasive and that hopefully they'll have hexproof in their flyers, Psionic Blast is able to deal direct damage to the opposing player, and that might help you finish out the game. And that's basically the shell of the deck. Now, if you're looking at a budget version of this, you can probably drop off Metallic Mimics, swap in something like Phantasmal Bears as a 1-drop, drop out the Aether Vials, perhaps put in some more of that interaction we previously talked about, so some more counter spells, and probably drop off the Cavern of Souls and the 4 Mutavaults. If you're looking for some sort of reach, Fairy Conclave is fairly inexpensive, although again, it doesn't become an illusion creature when it's activated. It is a flyer, so pseudo-evasive, and taps for blue, so you're not going to have any land problems with that in the deck. So that's it. Yeah, it's going to be a 5-minute modern deck tech. I hope you enjoy the deck. Give it out a try, sleeve it up. So alright, thanks for watching.